Commander Jake Morrison stared at the endless rows of supply boxes in the Luna base warehouse. 6 months ago, he had been flying combat missions across 3 star systems. Now he counted protein bars and oxygen canisters like some rookie fresh out of training camp. The metal walls of the storage facility felt like a prison. Every morning Jake woke up knowing he would spend another day doing meaningless work while the galaxy burned around him. The other officers avoided him now. They whispered behind his back about what happened at Kepler Station. Jake remembered that day clearly. The Zephyrian raiders had attacked the mining colony without warning. 3,000 civilians were trapped in the underground shelters, while enemy ships bombed the surface. Command had ordered all human forces to wait for reinforcements, but Jake could not wait. He had seen the scanner readings. The shelter life support systems were failing. In 2 hours everyone inside would be dead. So he disobeyed orders and led his squadron in a direct assault on the raider fleet. They saved every single person in those shelters. But Command was furious. Jake had violated the chain of command. He had risked valuable ships and pilots without permission. The fact that his plan worked did not matter to them. Admiral Kate Sullivan had been especially angry during his court-martial hearing. She told Jake that soldiers who could not follow orders were dangerous to everyone around them. The military needed discipline above all else. Personal heroics had no place in modern warfare, so they grounded him. No more flying, no more combat missions. Just supply duty on Luna base until further notice. Jake suspected that further notice would never come. The warehouse door opened with a loud clang. Beth Collins walked in carrying a datapad. She had been Jake's wingmate for 3 years before his disgrace. Now she was a squad leader while he counted boxers. Beth looked around to make sure they were alone before speaking. Her face was serious and worried. "Jake, we need to talk," she said quietly. "Something big is happening, and nobody wants to listen." Jake set down his inventory scanner. Any conversation was better than counting supplies. Beth had always been smart and careful. If she was worried, then something was really wrong. "What kind of something, Jake?" asked Beth. Activated her datapad and showed him a series of star charts. Red dots marked dozens of locations across human space. Each dot represented a Zephyrian fleet movement in the past month. "Intelligence has been tracking these patterns," Beth explained. "The Zephyrians are positioning forces near all our major colonies. But Command thinks they are just conducting training exercises." Jake studied the charts carefully. His tactical training kicked in automatically. The Zephyrian positions formed a perfect encirclement of human territory. This was not random movement. This was preparation for war. "How many ships are we talking about?" Jake asked. "Over 200. Confirmed," Beth replied. "Probably more that our scouts have not detected yet." The number made Jake's stomach drop. Humanity could barely field 50 combat vessels across all their colonies. They were completely outnumbered. "Have you shown this to Admiral Sullivan, Jake?" asked Beth. Nodded grimly. She said, "The Zephyrians are our allies now. They would never attack human colonies. The fleet movements are just coincidence." Jake wanted to laugh, but nothing about this was funny. Politicians always wanted to believe the best about their enemies. They thought diplomacy could solve any problem, but Jake had fought the Zephyrians before. He knew what they were really like. "What about the Galactic Council?" Jake asked. "Are they taking this seriously?" Beth's expression became even more worried. "That is the other problem. The Council is meeting next week to vote on human membership, but the Elvari delegation is pushing to exclude us completely." This was worse news. The Galactic Council controlled trade and military cooperation between all the major species. Without membership, humanity would be isolated and vulnerable. Perfect timing for a Zephyrian attack. "Why do the Elvari want us out?" Jake asked. "Lady Eliana, Starweaver says humans are too violent and unpredictable," Beth explained. "She claims we cannot be trusted with advanced technology or military cooperation." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. The Elvari were arrogant beyond belief. They lived in their perfect crystal cities and looked down on everyone else. They had never fought for survival like humans had. They did not understand what real war meant. So while the council debates, our membership, the Zephyrians, are surrounding our colonies, Jake said, and nobody sees the connection. Command thinks I am being paranoid, Beth replied. They say the timing is just coincidence. Jake knew better. In his experience, there were no coincidences in warfare. Everything happened for a reason. The Zephyrians were planning something big, and they wanted humanity isolated when it happened. What about Captain Torres? Jake asked. She commands the exploration fleet. Has she seen these reports? Beth shook her head. Torres is stuck doing diplomatic escort duty. Ambassador Lisa Grant wanted her best ship for the council meetings. That made sense. Captain Amy Torres was one of the few human officers the aliens respected. Her ship, the New Horizon, had explored more systems than any other vessel in the fleet. If anyone could convince the council to take the Zephyrian threat seriously, it would be her. I need to talk to Torres, Jake said. Maybe she can get through. To people who matter. Beth looked doubtful. Jake, you are grounded. Officially, you do not even have security clearance for this information. If Sullivan finds out I showed you these reports, we will both be in trouble. Jake understood the risk. But 3,000 people had been alive because he chose to act instead of following orders. Sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking rules. Set up a meeting, Jake told Beth. Make it look casual. Like old friends having drinks. Beth hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I will see what I can do. But Jake, be careful. Sullivan is still angry about Kepler Station. She would love an excuse to throw you in a military prison. After Beth left, Jake returned to his supply counting. But his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about those red dots on the star charts. Hundreds of enemy ships moving into position while humanity's leaders argued about council membership and diplomatic protocols. Jake had spent his whole life defending human colonies from raiders and pirates. He knew how predators thought. They waited for the perfect moment when their prey was distracted or divided. Then they struck fast and hard. The Zephyrians were predators. They had been raiding human shipping for years before the so-called peace treaty. A piece of paper would not change their nature. They were just waiting for the right opportunity. And humanity was about to give them exactly what they wanted. A divided council vote would leave humans isolated. No allies to call for help when the attack came. No trade agreements to maintain their economy. No military cooperation to share intelligence and resources. Jake finished his inventory work and headed back to his quarters. The hallways of Luna Base were nearly empty. Most of the personnel were either sleeping or working night shifts. Jake preferred it this way. Fewer people to stare at the disgraced commander. His room was small and basic. A bed, a desk, and a single window looking out at the lunar surface. Jake had requested this assignment specifically. He wanted to be able to see Earth from his window. It reminded him what he was fighting for. Tonight, Earth looked especially beautiful. The blue and white marble hanging in the black sky, home to 8 billion people who had no idea how much danger they were in. They trusted their military leaders to protect them, but those leaders were making terrible mistakes. Jake pulled up the supply reports on his personal computer. Officially, he was reviewing inventory data, but his real focus was on the shipping manifests. He wanted to know which colonies were receiving the most military supplies. The pattern was clear after just a few minutes of analysis. Defensive equipment was being concentrated near the inner systems. The outer colonies were being left vulnerable. Command was preparing for a siege rather than preventing an attack. This was exactly the wrong strategy. Against the Zephyrians, they specialized in hit-and-run tactics. They would strike the outer colonies first, to draw human forces away from the core systems. Then they would attack the weakened inner defenses. Jake had written 3 tactical reports explaining this vulnerability. All 3 had been ignored by Command. They said he was being alarmist and aggressive. They preferred the defensive approach recommended by their Elvari advisors. But the Elvari had never fought the Zephyrians in real combat. Their knowledge came from diplomatic briefings and theoretical studies. Jake had actual battle experience. He knew how the enemy really fought. Tomorrow he would meet with Captain Torres and try to convince her of the danger. If anyone could make command listen, it would be her. She had credibility that Jake had lost at Kepler Station. But Jake was not optimistic. The military leadership seemed determined to ignore any evidence that contradicted their preferred narrative. They wanted to believe in peace and diplomacy. Reality was much more complicated and dangerous. Jake closed his computer and prepared for bed. Outside his window, Earth continued its slow rotation, peaceful and beautiful, and completely unaware of the storm that was coming. Dr. Maya Patel walked through the crystal gardens of the Elvari homeworld, feeling completely out of place. The alien trees glowed with soft purple light, and the air smelled like flowers she had never seen before. Everything was beautiful and perfect, and made her feel clumsy and crude by comparison. She carried her research tablet carefully. 3 months of work were stored in its memory banks. 3 months of studying ancient Elvari texts that most humans would never be allowed to see. The cultural exchange program was supposed to build understanding between species, but Maya felt more confused than ever. The Elvari library was carved from a single, massive crystal that rose nearly a kilometer into the sky. Inside, the walls glowed with natural phosphorescence that provided perfect reading light. Maya had spent every day here since arriving on the homeworld. Most of the texts were about art and philosophy and music. The Elvari loved beauty above all else. But Maya was looking for historical records. She wanted to understand how different species had interacted in the past. Today, she had found something disturbing. Very disturbing. The tablet contained scanned images of documents that were over 2,000 years old. They described a war between the Elvari and a species called the Kethmori. Maya had never heard of the Kethmori before. According to current star charts, their territory was now controlled by the Zephyrian Empire. The ancient texts described terrible weapons that could control minds. The Kethmori had been proud warriors who fought fiercely for their independence. But then something changed. Suddenly, they began surrendering entire fleets without firing a shot. They welcomed Zephyrian occupation forces as liberators. The Elvari writers called it the Great Mystery. An entire species had simply stopped resisting conquest. Within a few years, the Kethmori civilization had completely disappeared. Their worlds became Zephyrian colonies, and their people vanished from history. Maya had cross-referenced the dates with other historical records. The timeline matched perfectly with the rise of Zephyrian power in that sector. What had been a minor, aggressive species became a major empire almost overnight. She needed to share this information with someone who could understand its implications. Lady Eliana Starweaver was the obvious choice. She was leading the Elvari delegation to the Galactic Council, and she had the political authority to act on new intelligence. But Maya was nervous about approaching such an important person. Lady Eliana was nobility from one of the oldest houses. She had been dealing with interstellar politics for over 3 centuries. Maya was just a young human scientist on a cultural exchange program. The library's reading hall was nearly empty when Maya arrived. Most Elvari preferred to study in their private chambers. Only serious researchers used the main facilities. Maya found her usual table near the historical archives section and activated her tablet. She reviewed her findings one more time before making any decisions. The evidence was circumstantial, but compelling. 3 separate historical accounts described the same pattern: proud warrior species suddenly becoming passive and cooperative, always followed by Zephyrian expansion into their territory. Maya was so focused on her research that she did not notice the figure approaching her table. When she looked up, Lady Eliana Starweaver was standing right beside her. The Elvari noble was exactly as beautiful as her reputation suggested. Tall and elegant, with the silver hair and violet eyes that marked her ancient bloodline. She wore simple robes, but they were cut from fabric that seemed to capture and reflect light in impossible ways. Dr. Patel, Lady Eliana said in perfect English, "I understand you have been studying our historical archives with great dedication." Maya stood up quickly and tried to remember the proper greeting protocols. "Lady Starweaver, it is an honor to meet you. Yes, I have been researching historical interactions between species. Please sit," Lady Eliana said gracefully, taking the chair across from Maya. "I am curious about your conclusions. Our archivists tell me you have been focusing on some rather obscure periods." Maya hesitated. She had hoped to prepare a formal presentation before sharing her theories, but this was clearly her only chance to reach someone with real political influence. "I have been studying the expansion patterns of the Zephyrian Empire," Maya said carefully. "There are some interesting correlations with the disappearance of other species." Lady Alina's expression remained polite, but Maya could see increased attention in her violet eyes. "What sort of correlations?" Maya activated her tablet and showed the star charts she had compiled. "These 3 species all controlled territory that is now part of the Zephyrian Empire, but according to your historical records they did not fight losing wars. They simply stopped resisting. The galaxy has seen many peaceful transitions of power." Lady Eliana replied, "Not every conquest requires military force." Maya pulled up the Kethmori documents, but these texts describe something different. The Kethmori were described as fierce warriors who would never surrender. Then suddenly, they were welcoming Zephyrian forces as friends. Lady Eliana studied the ancient texts with growing interest. "I have not seen these particular records before. They are from the restricted archives. The head archivist gave me special permission to review them," Maya explained. "I think they describe some kind of mind control technology." The Elvari noble's expression became more serious. "That is a very grave accusation, Dr. Patel. The Zephyrians are our allies in the Galactic Council. They have been cooperative partners for over a century." Maya understood the political implications of what she was suggesting. If the Zephyrians had been using mind control to expand their empire, it would change everything about galactic politics. But the evidence was too compelling to ignore. "Lady Starweaver, I know this sounds impossible, but please look at the pattern. 3 separate species, with strong military traditions, all suddenly becoming passive, at exactly the moment when forces arrived in their systems." Lady Eliana was quiet for several minutes while she reviewed the historical data. Maya could see her brilliant mind working through the implications. Finally, she spoke again. "Even if your theory is correct, these events happened centuries ago. Ancient history has little relevance to current politics." Maya pulled up her final piece of evidence. "That is what I thought too, until I started researching current events." She showed Lady Eliana recent intelligence reports about Zephyrian fleet movements. The same reports that Beth Collins had shown to Jake Morrison on Luna Base. But Maya had overlaid them with the historical expansion patterns. "The current positioning matches exactly with the historical pattern," Maya explained. "Large fleets moving into position around independent systems. The same preparation that preceded every previous conquest." Lady Eliana studied the charts with growing alarm. "Where did you obtain this intelligence data?" "I have contacts in the human military," Maya said. "They are concerned about the fleet movements, but their superiors think it is just training exercises." "And you believe the Zephyrians are preparing to use this mind control technology again?" Maya nodded. "The timing fits perfectly. The Galactic Council is about to vote on human membership. If humanity is excluded, they will be isolated and vulnerable. The perfect target for Zephyrian expansion." Lady Eliana stood up and began pacing around the table. Maya could see that her theories had made a real impact. The Elvari noble was brilliant and experienced enough to recognize a genuine threat when she saw one. "Dr. Patel, if you are correct, then the entire council is in danger. The Zephyrians would not limit themselves to conquering humanity. Every independent species would be at risk. That is why I had to share this with you," Maya said. "You have the authority to investigate further and warn the other delegates." Lady Eliana stopped pacing and looked directly at Maya. I will need to verify your findings with our own intelligence sources. But if this technology exists, we must find a way to defend against it. Meanwhile, on Luna Base, Jake Morrison was having his own meeting with Captain Amy Torres. They sat in a small bar that catered to off-duty military personnel. The lighting was dim, and the music was loud enough to prevent eavesdropping. Captain Torres looked tired. She had been shuttling diplomats between systems for weeks, while the council prepared for their crucial vote. The political pressure was enormous, and everyone wanted her to solve problems that were far beyond military capability. Jake, I have to be honest with you, Torres said quietly. Command thinks you are becoming obsessed with conspiracy theories. Admiral Sullivan specifically warned me not to encourage your paranoia. Jake sipped his drink and tried to control his frustration. Amy, you have seen the intelligence reports. How can you call it paranoia when we have hard evidence of enemy fleet movements? Because we do not have evidence of hostile intent, Torres, replied the Zephyrians. Claim they are conducting routine training exercises. Without proof of aggressive planning, we cannot treat them as enemies. Jake pulled out his own tablet and showed Torres the tactical analysis he had been working on. Look at the positioning, Amy. This is not random movement. This is a coordinated encirclement of human space. Torres studied the charts carefully. As an experienced ship captain, she understood military strategy better than most politicians. After several minutes, she looked up with worried eyes. I see the pattern, Jake. But what do you want me to do about it? Command has made their position clear. We are not supposed to treat the Zephyrians as a threat. You could warn the other council delegates. Jake suggested if they understand the danger, they might postpone the membership vote until we can investigate further. Torres shook her head. The Alvari delegation is pushing hard for immediate exclusion of humanity. Lady Eliana Starweaver thinks we are too violent and unpredictable for council membership. Delaying the vote would just give her more time to build support. Jake felt the familiar frustration of being ignored by people who should know better. Everyone was so focused on political games that they could not see the real danger approaching. Amy, what if I am right? Jake asked. What if the Zephyrians attack while everyone is arguing about council membership? What happens to those outer colonies that have been left defenseless? Torres was quiet for a long time. Finally she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Then a lot of good people are going to die, and it will be partly my fault for not listening. She finished her drink and stood up to leave. Jake, I cannot officially support your theories, but unofficially, I think you should keep investigating. If you find solid proof of Zephyrian hostile intent, I will make sure it reaches the right people. After Torres left, Jake sat alone in the bar thinking about his next move. He needed more evidence, but his current position gave him very limited access to classified intelligence. He was trapped counting supplies, while the galaxy moved toward disaster. But Beth Collins had mentioned Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez. She worked in intelligence and had been tracking Zephyrian communications. Maybe she had found something that Command was ignoring or misunderstanding. Jake finished his drink and headed back to his quarters. Tomorrow, he would find a way to contact Rodriguez without alerting Security Chief Nicole Barnes. It was risky, but the alternative was doing nothing while innocent people faced annihilation. The stakes were too high for caution. Jake had learned that lesson at Kepler Station. Sometimes saving lives required breaking rules. Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez stared at her computer screen in disbelief. The encrypted Zephyrian transmission she had just decoded contained information that would change everything. But she knew that nobody would believe her without absolute proof. The message was hidden inside routine supply requests between Zephyrian fleet commanders. On the surface it looked like normal military logistics. Requests for food and fuel and spare parts for training exercises. But Emma had noticed patterns in the numbers that did not match any standard coding system. After 3 days of analysis, she had cracked the real message. The Zephyrians were not planning training exercises. They were coordinating a massive assault on human colonies. The attack would begin exactly 48 hours after the Galactic Council vote on human membership. Emma printed the decoded message and her analysis notes. She had to get this information to someone who could act on it. But her immediate supervisor was Lieutenant Colonel Frank Wilson. He had already dismissed her previous reports about Zephyrian activity as coincidence and paranoia. The intelligence office was nearly empty at this hour. Most of the staff worked day shifts, while Emma preferred the quiet of night duty. It gave her more time to focus on deep analysis, without interruptions. She sealed the documents in a classified envelope and headed for the communications center. Maybe she could reach Captain Torres directly. The New Horizon was currently escorting diplomatic vessels to the council station. Torres might be able to warn the delegates before it was too late. But when Emma reached the comm center, she found Security Chief Nicole Barnes waiting for her. Barnes was a tough veteran who took regulations very seriously. She did not approve of junior officers going around the chain of command. Lieutenant Rodriguez Barnes said coldly, "I understand you have been requesting unauthorized access to encrypted communications." Emma felt her heart rate increase, but tried to keep her voice steady. "I was analyzing Zephyrian military transmissions as part of my regular duties." "Your regular duties do not include breaking encryption codes without supervision," Barnes replied. "You are confined to quarters pending a full investigation." Emma realized that someone had been monitoring her computer activity. Probably Lieutenant Colonel Wilson. He must have reported her unauthorized decryption work to security. "Chief Barnes, I have discovered something extremely important," Emma said desperately. "The Zephyrians are planning to attack human colonies in less than 48 hours. Barnes' expression did not change. "That will be investigated as part of the review process. Until then you are relieved of all duties." To security guards appeared and escorted Emma away from the communications center. They took her directly to her quarters and posted themselves outside the door. Emma was effectively under arrest for doing her job too well. She sat on her bed and tried to think of options. The decoded message was still in her pocket, but she had no way to transmit it to anyone. The guards outside would prevent her from leaving, and her computer access had probably been suspended. Emma activated her personal tablet and tried to access the military network. As expected, her account had been locked, but she still had access to the general communication system that connected all Luna base personnel. She composed a message to Jake Morrison. Everyone knew he had been grounded for disobeying orders at Kepler Station, but Emma had read his tactical reports and knew he understood the Zephyrian threat better than anyone in command. The message was simple and direct. She told Jake about the decoded transmission and the planned attack. She included coordinates and timing information from the Zephyrian fleet movements. Then she sent the message and hoped it would reach him before security noticed. Jake was lying on his bed reading supply reports when his tablet chimed with an incoming message. He almost ignored it, since most communications were just routine administrative updates. But something made him check the sender identification. Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez. Jake had heard of her from Beth Collins. She was supposed to be one of the best intelligence analysts on Luna Base. Smart and thorough, and completely dedicated to her work. Jake opened the message and felt his blood turn cold as he read the contents. The Zephyrians were not just positioning for a possible attack. They were actively coordinating a specific assault plan with precise timing. According to Rodriguez, the attack would begin immediately after the council vote excluded humanity from membership. The Zephyrians wanted political isolation before military action. It would prevent other species from coming to humanity's aid. Jake grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. He had to find Beth Collins and Captain Torres immediately. This information changed everything about the threat assessment. But when he opened his door, two security guards were standing in the hallway. Commander Morrison, one of them, said, "You are to report to Admiral Sullivan immediately." Jake realized that Security Chief Barnes must be rounding up anyone who might have received intelligence from Rodriguez. They were trying to contain the information before it could spread to people who might actually act on it. "What is this about?" Jake asked, as the guards escorted him through the base corridors. "The Admiral will explain everything," the guard replied. They brought Jake to Admiral Sullivan's office, in the command section of Luna Base. Sullivan was sitting behind her desk, looking angrier than Jake had ever seen her. Security Chief Barnes stood beside her with a grim expression. "Commander Morrison," Sullivan said icily, "it has come to my attention that you have been encouraging junior officers to violate security protocols." Jake decided that honesty was his only option. "Admiral, I have been investigating reports of unusual Zephyrian fleet activity. Lieutenant Rodriguez contacted me with new intelligence that confirms the threat. Lieutenant Rodriguez has been relieved of duty for unauthorized code breaking." Barnes interrupted. "Her so-called intelligence is based on paranoid speculation." Jake pulled out his tablet and showed them Rodriguez's decoded message. "Admiral, this is not speculation. The Zephyrians have specific attack plans, with precise timing. They are going to strike human colonies immediately after the council vote." Sullivan glanced at the tablet but did not really study the contents. "Commander, your obsession with conspiracy theories has gone too far. First, you disobeyed direct orders at Kepler Station. Now you are undermining military discipline with unfounded accusations. Admiral, 3,000 people are alive because I disobeyed orders at Kepler Station," Jake replied, "and millions more are going to die if we ignore this intelligence." Sullivan stood up and walked around her desk until she was standing directly in front of Jake. "Commander Morrison, you are hereby confined to quarters until further notice. Any attempt to spread these baseless theories will result in immediate court-martial proceedings." The guards escorted Jake back to his quarters and posted themselves outside his door, just like they had done with Rodriguez. Jake sat on his bed and tried to think of a way to get the intelligence to someone who would act on it. His tablet still had limited communication access. He could send messages to other Luna Base personnel, but anything going off base would be monitored by security. He needed to find someone who could physically carry the information to the right people. Jake thought about the maintenance staff and civilian contractors who worked on Luna Base. They had more freedom of movement than military personnel, and less security oversight. Maybe one of them could help. Then he remembered Samantha Wells. She was an engineer who worked on the prototype ships in the experimental hangar. Jake had met her during a technical briefing before his grounding. She seemed smart and independent, dash-minded. Jake composed a careful message to Wells explaining the situation. He could not include the classified intelligence directly, but he could ask her to meet with him about an urgent engineering problem. It was weak cover, but better than nothing. Meanwhile, on the Alvari homeworld, Dr. Maya Patel was having another meeting with Lady Eliana Starweaver. The Alvari noble had spent 2 days verifying Maya's historical research with her own intelligence sources. The results were disturbing. "Dr. Patel, your theories about Zephyrian mind control technology appear to be correct," Lady Eliana said grimly. "Our deep archives contain additional references to similar incidents." Maya felt vindicated, but also terrified. "What kind of references?" "Reports from Alvari observers who witnessed the fall of the Kathmori civilization," Lady Eliana explained. "They described weapons that could influence thoughts and emotions from great distances." "Do the reports explain how the technology works?" Maya asked. Lady Eliana nodded. "According to our ancestors, the Zephyrians used crystalline devices that generated specific psychic frequencies. The affected individuals would become docile and cooperative, while believing they were acting of their own free will." Maya realized the full implications of what this meant. If they still have this technology, they could use it at the council meeting. They could influence the delegates to vote however they wanted. "That is exactly what I fear," Lady Eliana replied. "The council station would be the perfect target. Representatives from 40 different species, all gathered in one location. We have to warn the other delegates?" Maya said urgently. Lady Eliana looked troubled. "I have tried to contact my diplomatic staff, but..." Communications with the Council Station have been experiencing technical difficulties. Very convenient technical difficulties. Maya felt a chill of fear. Do you think the Zephyrians are already jamming communications? It is possible, Lady Eliana replied. If they are preparing to deploy mind control technology, they would want to prevent outside interference. They were interrupted by Lady Alina's personal aide, who entered the room with obvious urgency. My lady, we have received a priority message from the human vessel New Horizon. Lady Eliana took the message tablet and read it quickly. Captain Torres reports unusual energy readings from Zephyrian ships near the Council Station. She is requesting permission to investigate. Maya and Lady Eliana looked at each other with growing alarm. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. The Zephyrians were clearly preparing something for the council meeting. Lady Eliana, we have to get to the Council Station immediately, Maya said. If we can prove the existence of mind control technology, the other delegates will have to take action. Lady Eliana stood up and began issuing orders to her aide. Prepare my fastest ship for immediate departure and contact our intelligence service. I want everything they have on Zephyrian psychic warfare capabilities. Back on Luna Base, Jake Morrison was preparing his own desperate plan. Samantha Wells had agreed to meet with him in the maintenance tunnels beneath the experimental hangar. The location would provide privacy and avoid security cameras. Jake made his way through the service corridors using maintenance access codes that Beth Collins had provided. The tunnels were dark and cramped, but they connected to every major facility on the base. Wells was waiting for him near the power distribution center. She was a small woman with intelligent eyes and practical coveralls stained with machine oil. Jake had always respected engineers because they dealt with reality instead of politics. Commander Morrison, Wells said quietly. Beth Collins told me you might need help with something unofficial. Jake showed her Rodriguez's decoded intelligence and explained the situation. Samantha, I need someone to get this information to Captain Torres. Without going through official channels, Wells studied the tablet screen carefully. This is serious stuff, Commander. If you are right about the attack timing, we have less than 48 hours. That is why I need your help, Jake replied. I am confined to quarters, and so is Rodriguez. You have access to the experimental hangar and the prototype ships. Wells understood what he was suggesting. You want me to steal a ship and fly to the Council Station? I want you to help me steal a ship, Jake corrected. I am not asking you to take this risk alone. Wells was quiet for several minutes while she considered the implications. Commander, if we do this, we will both be probably sent to military prison for the rest of our lives. Jake nodded. But if we do nothing, millions of people might die, including everyone at the Council Station. Wells made her decision. The prototype stealth ship in Hangar 7 is fueled and ready for testing. If we are going to do this crazy thing, we should use the best equipment available. Jake felt hope for the first time in days. How long will it take to reach the Council Station? 18 hours at maximum acceleration, Wells replied. We will arrive just before the council vote. Jake realized they would be cutting it very close. What about security clearance to leave the base? Wells smiled for the first time since their conversation began. Commander, I designed half the security systems in this facility. Getting past them will not be a problem. They spent the next hour planning their escape route and cover story. Wells would create a maintenance emergency that required immediate attention in Hangar 7. Jake would slip away from his quarters during the shift change when the guards were distracted. It was a desperate plan with very little chance of success. But Jake had learned at Kepler Station that sometimes desperate situations required desperate actions. The only real failure would be giving up without trying. The Council Station hung in space like a giant crystal flower, with 40 different sections representing each member species. Jake Morrison pressed his face against the viewport of the stolen prototype ship and marveled at the engineering achievement. But he had no time to appreciate beauty when millions of lives were at stake. Samantha Wells worked frantically at the pilot controls, trying to establish communication with the station, still getting interference on all frequencies. Jake Whatever the Zephyrians are doing, they have completely jammed normal communications. Jake studied the scanner readings, showing energy signatures from the Zephyrian fleet positioned around the station. Those are not normal ship configurations. Sam, they have deployed some kind of crystalline arrays between their vessels. The stealth ship had made the journey from Luna Base in record time, but they had arrived just as the council voting session was beginning. Through the viewports, Jake could see the ceremonial lights that marked the start of formal proceedings. Their wells pointed to a small docking bay on the human section. I can get us in through maintenance access, but we will have to move fast once we are aboard. Jake activated his personal communicator and tried once more to reach Captain Torres. New Horizon, this is Commander Morrison requesting immediate assistance. Static filled the channel, but then a weak signal came through. Jake, is that really you? What are you doing here? Amy, listen carefully, Jake said urgently. The Zephyrians are using mind control technology. They are going to influence the council. Vote, and then attack human colonies. The signal faded in and out, making communication difficult. Jake, you are breaking up. Did you say mind control? Yes, Jake shouted into the communicator. Get Dr. Rachel Kim to scan for psychic frequencies. The Zephyrians have crystalline devices that can affect thoughts and emotions. The signal cut out completely as Wells guided their ship into the docking bay. Emergency lights activated as the bay doors sealed behind them. They had made it aboard the station, but Jake knew their real problems were just beginning. Security. Alarms were already sounding as they exited the ship. Jake had expected this since their arrival was completely unauthorized. But they had to reach the council chambers before the voting concluded. This way, Wells said, leading him through maintenance corridors that connected to the main station. Systems, I studied the blueprints during our flight. The council chambers are 3 levels up. They climbed through service shafts and emergency passages while alarms continued blaring throughout the station. Jake could hear security teams searching for them, but the maintenance areas provided good cover. As they reached the upper levels, Jake began to feel strange. His thoughts seemed fuzzy and his emotions felt dampened. It was like being underwater, or heavily sedated. He had never experienced anything like it before. Sam, do you feel different? Jake asked, as they paused at an access hatch. Wells nodded with obvious confusion. Like my brain is wrapped in cotton. I can think, but everything seems distant and unimportant. Jake realized they were experiencing the effects of Zephyrian mind control technology, but somehow they were still able to function, unlike the complete domination described in the historical records. We must have some natural resistance, Jake said. Dr. Patel theorized that humans might be naturally immune to psychic manipulation. They opened the access hatch and found themselves in a corridor leading directly to the council chambers. Through the transparent walls, Jake could see the voting session in progress. Representatives from 40 species sat in a vast circular chamber while holographic displays showed the current vote tallies. The human exclusion measure was winning by a wide margin. Species that had previously supported human membership were now voting against it. Jake could see Ambassador Lisa Grant at the human delegation table, looking confused and defeated. But more disturbing was the behavior of the other delegates. They all moved and spoke in the same slow, deliberate manner. Their faces showed no emotion, and their eyes seemed unfocused. The mind control was clearly affecting everyone in the chamber. Everyone except Lady Eliana Starweaver and Dr. Maya Patel, who had just arrived from the Elvari homeworld. They stood near the entrance to the chamber, looking around with obvious alarm at the strange behavior of the other delegates. Jake activated his emergency communicator and broadcast on all frequencies. This is Commander Morrison, to all station personnel. The council chamber is under attack by Zephyrian mind control technology. Evacuate immediately. His transmission was immediately jammed, but he hoped someone had heard it. He needed to reach Lady Eliana and Dr. Patel before the Zephyrians realized they were immune to the psychic effects. Jake and Wells entered the chamber through a service entrance just as War Prime Zexthal of the Zephyrian Empire stepped forward to address the assembly. The alien leader was tall and imposing, with scaled skin and glowing red eyes. He radiated menace despite his diplomatic robes. Fellow council members, Zexthal said, in a voice that seemed to echo inside Jake's head, "Today, we take the final step toward galactic peace. The exclusion of the violent human species will ensure stability for all civilized worlds." Jake could see crystalline devices hidden around the chamber walls. They pulsed with eerie light that synchronized with Zexthal's words. The mind control technology was clearly active and influencing every delegate in the room, except for the humans and Elvari, who seemed to have natural resistance. Lady Eliana spotted Jake, and Dr. Patel moved toward them, while avoiding the attention of Zephyrian guards. When they reached each other, Jake quickly explained what he had discovered. The crystalline arrays are broadcasting psychic frequencies that make other species passive and suggestible, Jake said quietly. But humans and Elvari seem to be naturally resistant. That explains why our species have been excluded from Zephyrian expansion. Lady Eliana replied, "We cannot be controlled, so we must be eliminated." Dr. Patel pointed to the vote display. "Look at the numbers. Species that were allied with humans yesterday are voting for exclusion today. The mind control is completely overriding their normal judgment." Jake realized they had to act fast before the vote became final. "We need to disable those crystalline devices. Without the psychic influence, the other delegates should regain their free will." But as they prepared to move, Zextal noticed their resistance to the mind control. "Guards," he commanded, "arrest those individuals who are not properly participating in our democratic process." Zephyrian soldiers moved toward them with weapons drawn. Jake pushed the others behind a pillar and activated his communicator again. "Captain Torres, if you can hear this, we need immediate assistance in the council chamber." The signal was jammed, but Jake heard explosions from somewhere else on the station. Apparently, Torres had received his earlier message and was taking action against the Zephyrian fleet. Dr. Patel, Lady Eliana said urgently, "You studied the historical records. How were the crystalline devices destroyed in the past?" "The ancient texts mention that the Kethmori resistance used electromagnetic pulses," Dr. Patel replied. "But they needed to get very close to the devices." Jake looked around the chamber and spotted the control center where the main crystalline array was located. "I can reach that platform if you create a distraction." Wells pulled out her engineering tools. "I can overload the power systems. That should create enough chaos to cover your approach." Lady Eliana stepped out from behind the pillar and addressed the controlled delegates in a voice that carried clearly through the chamber. "Citizens of the galaxy, you are being manipulated by Zephyrian mind control technology." Her words had an immediate effect. Some delegates began showing signs of confusion as her natural Elvari psychic abilities interfered with the Zephyrian control signals. The crystalline devices pulsed more rapidly, trying to maintain their influence. Zextal realized his plan was being disrupted. "Silence the Elvari female immediately." Zephyrian guards fired energy weapons at Lady Eliana, but she used her natural agility to dodge behind another pillar. Dr. Patel helped by throwing furniture to block their line of sight. Wells triggered her power overload, and half the chamber lights went out. Emergency systems activated, and alarms began sounding throughout the station. In the chaos, Jake sprinted toward the control platform. Zephyrian soldiers tried to stop him, but Jake's military training served him well. He fought through them, using tactics that were too unpredictable for their controlled minds to counter. His natural human creativity was an advantage against opponents who could only follow programmed responses. Jake reached the main crystalline array and found it protected by an energy shield. He needed to find the control panel that operated the shield generator, but the platform was crawling with Zephyrian technicians. He fought his way to the control systems while energy blasts exploded around him. The Zephyrians were desperate to prevent him from reaching their precious mind control technology. Finally, Jake found the right panel and began working on the control circuits. His basic engineering knowledge was enough to understand the power flow patterns. He just needed to reverse the energy polarity to create a feedback loop. "Stop," Zextol commanded, appearing on the platform behind Jake. "You cannot comprehend the peace we are bringing to this galaxy." Jake turned to face the Zephyrian leader, while keeping his hands on the control panel. "I have seen your kind of peace. It looks a lot like slavery. Inferior species require guidance," Zextol replied. "We provide order where there was only chaos. You provide chains where there was freedom," Jake said, as he triggered the feedback loop. The crystalline array began to pulse erratically, as conflicting energy patterns overloaded its systems. Cracks appeared in the crystal structure, and the psychic broadcasting became unstable. Throughout the chamber, the controlled delegates began showing signs of awakening. Their eyes regained focus, and their movements became more natural. The mind control was weakening as the crystalline devices failed. Zextol raised his weapon to kill Jake, but Lady Eliana arrived on the platform and tackled the Zephyrian leader. They fought while Jake continued working on the control systems. With a final surge of energy, the main crystalline array exploded in a shower of crystal fragments. The psychic broadcasting stopped completely, and the remaining devices around the chamber went dark. The council delegates looked around in confusion as their minds cleared. Many of them seemed shocked by their recent behavior and the votes they had cast while under Zephyrian influence. Ambassador Lisa Grant stood up at the human delegation table. "I call for an immediate suspension of all voting pending a full investigation of Zephyrian interference," but Zextol was not finished. Even as Lady Eliana held him at gunpoint, he activated a communication device. "All Zephyrian forces implement contingency plan Omega. Begin assault on human colonies immediately." Jake realized that destroying the mind control technology had only solved part of the problem. The Zephyrian fleet was still positioned to attack defenseless human worlds, and without the element of surprise, their assault would be even more brutal. "We have to warn the colonies," Jake said urgently. "The attack will begin within hours." Dr. Patel was already working on the station communication systems. "I can boost the signal strength, but I need more power." Wells ran to the power control station. "Give me 30 seconds. As the enhanced communications came online, Jake broadcast a warning to every human colony in the galaxy. "This is Commander Morrison to all human settlements. Zephyrian forces are inbound. Implement emergency defense protocols immediately," but Jake knew that warnings alone would not be enough. The outer colonies had minimal defenses and could not withstand a full military assault. They needed help from other council species who now understood the true nature of the Zephyrian threat. Lady Eliana took control of the council chamber communication system. "All loyal council members, this is your opportunity to stand against tyranny. The Zephyrians have revealed their true nature. We must act together to defend freedom." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species after species pledged their fleets to defend human colonies against Zephyrian aggression. The mind control had been broken, and the galaxy was finally seeing the truth about their supposed allies. But the real battle was just beginning. The battle for the outer colonies raged across a dozen star systems as Zephyrian assault fleets met unexpected resistance from the newly formed Galactic Defense Alliance. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the commandeered Zephyrian command ship, watching tactical displays that showed the tide of war turning in favor of freedom. It had been 3 hours since the mind control revelation at the council station. 3 hours since the galaxy learned the truth about Zephyrian manipulation and conquest. Now 40 species were working together to stop an empire that had been built on lies and psychic domination. Commander Dr. Rachel Kim called from the science station. "I am detecting massive power buildups in the remaining Zephyrian crystalline arrays. They are trying to re-establish mind control over their own forces." Jake studied the energy readings. With growing alarm, they are losing control of their fleet commanders. Some of the Zephyrian ships are breaking off their attacks. Lady Aliana Starweaver worked beside him, coordinating the defense efforts. It appears that even the Zephyrians themselves were partially controlled by their leadership. Without the psychic influence, many of them are questioning their orders, Captain Amy. Torres appeared on the main communication screen from the bridge of the New Horizon. Jake, we have a problem. Warprime's exile escaped from the Council Station in a heavily armed dreadnought. He is heading directly for Earth, with the most loyal Zephyrian forces. Jake felt his stomach drop. Earth was the heart of human civilization, with over 8 billion people and minimal planetary defenses. If Zexthal reached the homeworld, he could cause unimaginable destruction. How long until he arrives? Jake asked. 16 hours at current speed, Torres replied. But we cannot intercept him with our current fleet positioning. Jake looked at the tactical display, showing friendly forces scattered across multiple systems. The defense of the outer colonies had been successful, but it left Earth vulnerable to direct attack. Samantha Wells looked up from the engineering station commander. This Zephyrian ship has the most advanced engine systems I have ever seen. We could reach Earth ahead of Zextal if we pushed the drives to maximum. Do it, Jake, ordered everyone else. Continue coordinating the colony defense. Lady Ileana, can you contact the Elvari fleet and ask them to provide backup? Already done, Lady Ileana replied. Admiral Silvermoon is bringing 12 heavy cruisers, but they will not arrive for another day. Jake realized they would be facing the Zephyrian dreadnought with only a skeleton crew on an unfamiliar alien ship. The odds were terrible, but he had faced worse situations before. Dr. Maya Patel activated the ship's communication array. I am broadcasting our intentions to all allied forces. Maybe some of them can break off from the colony battles to assist us. The commandeered Zephyrian ship accelerated toward Earth, while Jake tried to form a battle plan with limited resources. The enemy dreadnought was larger and more heavily armed than anything in the human fleet. But Jake had learned that superior firepower did not always guarantee victory. Sam, what do you know about Zephyrian weapon systems? Jake asked. Wells consulted. Her engineering displays, they rely heavily on energy shields and plasma cannons. Very advanced, but also very predictable. Their tactics seem designed for fighting controlled opponents who cannot adapt quickly. Jake smiled for the first time in hours. Then we have an advantage. Human creativity versus Zephyrian programming. As they approached Earth's solar system, Jake could see the blue and white marble that had been his inspiration during those long months of supply duty on Luna Base. Now he had a chance to defend his homeworld against the greatest threat it had ever faced. The enemy dreadnought was already in Earth orbit when they arrived. Zextal was broadcasting demands for human surrender while his ship bombarded the orbital defense platforms. The planet's shields were holding, but they would not last long against such concentrated firepower. This is Warprime Zextal to the primitive human leadership. The transmission echoed across all frequencies. Surrender immediately, or your pathetic world will be reduced to radioactive ash. Jake activated the communication system and responded with calm determination. This is Commander Jake Morrison to Zextal. The only one surrendering today will be you. Zextal's laughter filled the channel. The disgraced human officer who destroyed my mind control network. I will enjoy killing you personally before I sterilize your breeding ground. The Zephyrian dreadnought turned its massive guns toward Jake's smaller ship. Energy blasts powerful enough to vaporize asteroids erupted from its weapon arrays. But Wells had studied the enemy fire patterns and was ready with evasive maneuvers. They are firing in predetermined sequences, Wells reported as she piloted through the barrage. Classic Zephyrian precision, but no adaptation to our movements. Jake realized that Zextal was still thinking like a controller rather than a warrior. He expects us to react predictably, because that is how controlled opponents behave. Lady Eliana coordinated their return fire, while Dr. Patel worked on disrupting the dreadnought's communication systems. If we can prevent Zextal from coordinating his ship's defenses, we might have a chance, but their weapons barely scratched. The massive enemy vessel, while its return fire, came dangerously close to destroying them. Jake needed a different strategy that could overcome the huge disparity in firepower. Then he remembered the lessons of Kepler Station. Sometimes the most effective tactics were the ones that seemed completely crazy to conventional military thinking. "Sam, take us directly at their main gun," Jake ordered. "Commander, that is suicide." Wells protested. "One direct hit will destroy us. Trust me," Jake replied. "Sextall cannot adapt to tactics that make no logical sense." Wells reluctantly followed his orders and flew straight toward the dreadnought's primary weapon array. The massive plasma cannon swiveled to track their approach, but its targeting systems were calibrated for long-range combat. At the last possible second, Jake ordered emergency stop and reverse thrust. Their ship decelerated so rapidly that the inertial dampeners nearly failed, but the maneuver placed them directly underneath the dreadnought's main hull, where its weapons could not target them effectively. Now Jake shouted full power to all weapons. "Target their shield generators, Lady." Eliana concentrated fire on the vulnerable shield projectors while Dr. Patel uploaded computer viruses into the dreadnought's systems. The combination of kinetic and electronic warfare began to have effect as sections of the enemy's defenses failed. Sextall tried to shake them loose by spinning his massive ship, but Jake had anticipated this response. Sam matched their rotation and stay in the blind spot. Wells demonstrated piloting skills that would have impressed the best human aces as she kept their smaller ship positioned perfectly beneath the enemy vessel. Meanwhile, Jake coordinated the assault on critical systems. "Shield generators down," Lady Eliana reported. "Hull integrity compromised in sections 12 through 18. Jake saw his opportunity. "Dr. Patel, can you access their life support systems?" "Already working on it," Dr. Patel replied. "I am flooding their bridge with sleep gas. Not lethal, but very effective." The dreadnought's movements became erratic as its crew succumbed to the chemical agent. Jake ordered Wells to maneuver them alongside the enemy bridge section. "Lady Eliana, prepare for boarding action," Jake said, as he grabbed a weapon. "We are going to take that ship." They used emergency airlocks to transfer between vessels, while the unconscious Zephyrian crew could not resist. Jake led the assault on the bridge, where Sextall lay sprawled across his command chair. But the war prime was not completely unconscious. As Jake approached, he lunged with a concealed blade. They fought desperately, while Lady Eliana secured the bridge controls, and Dr. Patel worked to prevent the ship's automatic systems from activating self-destruct protocols. Sextall was larger and stronger than Jake, but the human officer had learned to fight in unpredictable ways. He used furniture and equipment as weapons, while constantly changing his attack angles. The Zephyrian leader could not adapt quickly enough to counter such chaotic tactics. Finally, Jake managed to disarm his opponent and hold him at gunpoint. "It is over, Sextall. Your empire is finished." The defeated war prime looked around at his captured bridge with hatred burning in his eyes. "You have won nothing, human. The Zephyrian Empire spans hundreds of worlds. Other war primes will continue our mission." Lady Eliana activated the ship's communication array perhaps, but now the galaxy knows the truth about your methods. Every species will be watching for signs of mind control. Your empire was built on deception, and deception only works when people do not know to look for it. Dr. Patel had accessed the ship's database and was downloading intelligence about other Zephyrian operations. "Commander, I am finding evidence of mind control programs throughout their territory. We can use this information to help other species break free." Jake realized that their victory was just the beginning of a larger liberation movement. Dr. Patel, transmit everything to the Galactic Council. Let every species see what the have been doing to them. As news of their success spread across the galaxy, the remaining Zephyrian forces began surrendering or fleeing to unexplored regions of space. The empire that had seemed invincible just hours before was collapsing as its foundation of lies crumbled. Captain Torres arrived with the human fleet, just as Jake finished securing the captured dreadnought. "Jake, I cannot believe you took on a ship that size, with a skeleton crew." "I had excellent help," Jake replied, looking at Lady Eliana and Dr. Patel and Samantha Wells. And I remembered that sometimes the most effective weapon is doing something your enemy thinks is impossible. Admiral Kate Sullivan appeared on the communication screen from Luna Base. For the first time since Jake had known her, she looked genuinely impressed. Commander Morrison, I owe you an apology. Your actions today saved not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. Jake felt vindicated, but not triumphant. Admiral, I was just doing my job. Sometimes protecting people requires breaking rules. Understood, Commander Sullivan replied. Your rank and privileges are hereby fully restored. In fact, I am promoting you to captain and giving you command of the new multi-species task force. Lady Eliana stepped forward. If I may, Admiral. Captain Morrison has proven that humans possess exactly the qualities the galaxy needs: courage, creativity, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat when fighting for what is right. Dr. Patel added her own observations. The Zephyrians succeeded for so long because they could predict and control how other species would react. But humans are naturally unpredictable. You cannot control people who think outside established patterns. Jake looked out at Earth hanging peacefully in space below them. The planet that had seemed doomed just hours before was now safe. But more importantly, the galaxy had learned that freedom was worth fighting for. 6 months later, Jake stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Vindication, watching a joint training exercise between human and Elvari forces. Beside him, Lady Eliana served as diplomatic liaison while Captain Torres commanded the growing multi-species fleet. The Galactic Council had not only admitted humanity, but had asked them to lead the effort to liberate worlds still under Zephyrian control. It turned out that human unpredictability was exactly what was needed to counter an enemy that relied on controlling other people's thoughts and actions. Jake had gone from disgraced supply officer to galactic hero in less than a week, but he knew that the real victory belonged to everyone who had refused to give up when the situation seemed hopeless. They had grounded him for being too human, but it was exactly that humanity that had saved them all. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the best way to follow orders was to know when to break them, and sometimes the most effective military strategy was to do something that made no sense to anyone except the person crazy enough to try it. Jake Morrison smiled as he watched human and alien crews working together to protect the freedom they had all fought to preserve. The future looked brighter than ever, because people had learned that unity was stronger than control and courage was more powerful than fear.